Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Svelte Radio. Today we have another guest, um, Amelia Wattenberger. Is that how you say it? Yeah.
That's good.
All right. Perfect. Would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Amelia. Um, I haven't introduced myself in my current job yet. I guess my job title is journalist engineer. I work at a site called The Pudding, and we do like data-driven, interactive visual stories.
Cool. So as always, I'm Kevin, and I run Svelte School, a site about learning about Svelte. I guess that's easy enough. Anthony.
So my name is Anthony. I'm a Svelte maintainer. I'm also the CTO of a company called Bionk, which is a platform for travel providers to take bookings, payments, manage their inventory, all that sort of good stuff.
Great. All right. So let's start off with your job title. What's a journalist engineer?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's new to me. I started this job about 5 months ago. I was previously working as like a full, typical front-end developer. So this is definitely a shift into something a little bit more creative. So the pudding is about 8 people right now, so it's pretty small, and everyone at the company spans like the entire stack. Like we all do the journalism bits, the design bits, the development bits. It's pretty amazing to be in a team with such talented coworkers. So I guess all of us, what we do is we'll take an idea from conception, figure out a good data source, do the data analysis, create a mini site to kind of highlight that data while writing an article about it that brings readers through the data, and then through publishing. And I am actually the first hired to only work on the client side. So I'll do this with big brands like Google, or research institutions, where if they want to highlight their research in kind of like a more human-friendly way, then we'll go and we'll help them make like a very interesting site about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So just out of interest then, so are you aware of Rich Harris? And I assume you must be, right, in the industry. And how do you closely do you think your job aligns with kind of what he does as well? Because he also has that title of like journalistic engineer or...
Yeah, for sure. He's working at the New York Times. So because their publication, The Upshot, is so like widely known, it's often what I'll compare my job to. I'll say, you create articles like The Upshot. I think one difference is they're very much on the news cycle, whereas the things I'll work on, like it's not breaking news, it's not anything time sensitive. It's just, it's a little bit more slower paced, and like we really get to publish kind of like more evergreen content. So it'll still be relevant, a few months from now. Other than that, that's a great question. I'd love to ask him myself. I don't know how his day-to-day differs.
So what kind of tools do you use at the was it the pudding, or just pudding? The pudding.
Pudding.
All right.
A specific pudding. Yeah, great question. So it really depends who's making the article. I think there's a lot of latitude just to kind of build however you want to build, which was awesome for me coming in. I had primarily been building in React before I joined, and kind of had my eye on Svelte. I was like, hey, I kind of want to test this out. And it's really kind of perfect for what we do. I think, like, one, it's really easy to understand if you just know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whereas React or Vue or Angular, you kind of have to learn the framework before, you know, jumping in. Whereas I feel like someone who's less comfortable with frameworks could jump right into a Svelte project because it's familiar, right? It's pretty much just HTML.
So you've been working in React mostly before this, right? So what are like some of the pain points with using React when it comes to like visualize like your kind of work?
Right, yeah. The biggest ones have to do with, there's a lot of things that are kind of built into Svelte that you have to build yourself with React. Like I just ported one of my contract projects from Svelte over to React last night, and there's things like the bind client with, like you can, there's like, you type 2 words or 4 words and you have a variable that updates whenever an element size updates. And like to do that in React, you can have a hook, but you're still gonna have to like make a ref and then hook it up to the element and then like have some kind of resize observer or like window resize event. It's just like a lot more overhead there that Svelte kind of just handles for you. So that is like amazing to just have built in, because that's like basically any chart I make, you're gonna need to do that because SVG doesn't resize.
Do you think that maybe a lot of these features that React is kind of missing stems from the fact that Svelte was built for a specific purpose, which was like, well, exactly what you do basically. Yeah. And do you think a lot of that comes from that, and it just happens to be really useful for like main web apps anyway?
I do wonder that. And like that's a big reason why I was so interested, because I was like, well, it's got to be, you know, great for this kind of work. Like this is what he's doing, and then he built it for this purpose. Although a lot of really great frameworks come out of newsrooms, like Django, I think was originally for some Kansas newsroom.
That makes sense.
Others.
I wonder.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with like the news cycle and it being so short, right? They have to produce a lot in a short time.
Yeah, very quickly. And I also think like having worked on a product before, there's something really nice about having like a much smaller scope for the projects that you're working on. You really have to know your build tools. You really have to like understand what's going on. And it's a lot easier to understand when you're building things that are a little smaller. Whereas like if you work on this big product, there's so much other things like, you know, you have to understand like global state isn't as big of a thing when you're building these smaller sites and stuff like that. So I think like you really understand the stack and you really have to know it, and you really have to be able to like wield it, create new sites all the time. That gives you a really good understanding. It's largely very similar.
Yeah.
As in the languages are similar, or like the products end up similar. What do you mean by similar? Because that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, so I'll scope like components the same. Like if I have you know, an app.svelte, I'll create an app.jsx to port it over to React. And then like the biggest changes, right? You'll change like on mount from Svelte to use effect in React, and then you know your imports are all the same. The biggest change, I guess, is like the rendering language. Like React is using JSX, so you're something I actually really like about it is that it's all JavaScript. So as much as you know JavaScript, you know how to write JSX, like instead of like a specific each, like this Svelte template language, hashtag each, you're gonna do like this object.map and then just map over an object, which is both really nice because then like it's kind of obvious how to use that and how to change it. But it's also kind of annoying because it's a little like, people always complain about like the way you do like a Boolean render in React, like the conditional rendering, like you'll do the like Boolean statement and then ampersand, ampersand, and then that's like an if statement, but it's not really obvious.
It's kind of, that's the kind of thing that I don't mind React as a concept. I think it's pretty good. I haven't used it really since hooks, but I know that hooks are what Svelte's kind of based on. It's pretty cool. The thing that actually got me was the JSX thing, because I've always been pushing and always learned through my career that the more that you can make logicless templates, the better and easier something fits together. And React's just kind of, I mean, React's gone against a lot of things, right? And for a lot of reasons that it's a good thing. But for me, those logicless templates in React, it's the logic and the templates all bundled together. How do you get around, how do you keep your code readable when everything's kind of rendered by JavaScript? Because it seems to me sometimes people just go right overboard with it. And like you said, using ampersand, ampersand. And
yeah, it can be frustrating. There's some nice things about having JSX as kind of like a first, what do you call it, first class language? Like when you're writing, like I'll often make like an icon component, and in React you can kind of just throw around these like JSX strings, whereas in Svelte, if you want to use a templating language, it has to be a Svelte component. I'm not explaining that well. Like in React, like I can have an array of JSX, like JSX elements, but in Svelte you can't really do that. Like you have to like parse a string, or
yeah, you'd have to build an array and then like iterate it within each or something like that. It would, it's more like, again, separated, I guess. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So what encouraged you to try Svelte?
I forget the first side project I tried with it. I don't know. It was getting a lot of hype. I think I also watched one of the seminal Rich Harris talks, and I love how opinionated he is.
Yeah.
I think it's great, like for someone to have such strong opinions and then to like act on them and try to bring them to life. So I thought that was great. I was a little like scooped out at first by the like, you have this like two-way reactive binding, whereas being in React land, it's very simple and very comfortable to have the like one-way data flow. So like to be able to update a variable by just like having like a new assignment made me very uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
Other than that, it was like a great onboarding process.
Yeah. That's one part of React I never really understood why the two-way binding was that bad, because I think that's partially because I don't know what came before, when apparently I guess it came from Angular, where people were kind of burned by the magicness of two-way binding all over the app.
Yeah, definitely.
But like Svelte doesn't do that. Svelte does local two-way binding just within the component. You can't do two-way binding anywhere else, right? I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it.
Although you can bind, like, so when I was porting this project over to React, I had this one like subcomponent that you have like bind prop.
Yep.
And then you can kind of like keep those updated, whereas in React you need a callback that'll update it that way. But having worked on large Angular 1 or Angular 2 projects in the past, like it gets very scary because things will be changing. You don't know where they're changing. You have no way to like query like why is this value the way it is. It gets scary.
Yeah, I think that's why Rich is very in favor of a model of like a unidirectional flow of data, right? So that you can technically bind up a big chain of components, but if you do that, you're doing it intentionally for some bizarre reason. And I think the general concept is use stores or just use binding between two components. And I think that goes along with his reasoning of how he thinks data should flow, which makes perfect sense to me. And it's the thing that Angular didn't enforce in any meaningful way, and that's why people got really burned by Angular's crazy observers all over the place and stuff. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. There's always this trade-off with frameworks with like how much magic is there, and I feel like Angular is on the extreme end of like you can write 2 lines of code and have like a to-do list And like, it's really great when you're first starting out and you're like, wow, I'm so powerful. But then it can get like, you can't exactly follow the logic everywhere. And there's always like gotchas. You have to understand the framework. And then like, I feel like Svelte and React are on this other end where like, it's a pretty minimal framework. Like to understand the API, you know, it's maybe an hour of your time if you're familiar with frameworks.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this actually kind of segues into another question I've got, and then I'll stop asking questions for a minute, give someone else a go. But the question is literally, you also know C++, right?
I have tried to use C++. I definitely wouldn't say I know it.
You built something in C++, and that I'm just impressed by that overall, to be honest.
It was definitely a glimpse into this other world of like memory management, and it was a pretty fun project. At my first job, we had just like this very fun exploratory arm where they're like, just do whatever you want. So we had a big South by Southwest party coming. We were in Austin with like, I forget, it was like local natives or Spoon was gonna play. It was like, cool. We were like a 40-person company. Like, this is very exciting. So I was like, all right, well, we need a photo booth. So I set up a webcam, and then it did some face tracking, and it found your face, and our mascot was a luchador, the Mexican wrestlers. So it put like a Mexican wrestler mask on your face, and it was great. But also I didn't know C++.
Sure.
And like, so, that was the way to do it.
Pick a nice simple project like face tracking then, sure.
I mean, I did C++ because there is a like wonderful face tracking library. Like, I did not build this from scratch, but it was just like frantic Googling.
I mean, C++ is, I did it in university, and I've never, ever really understood it at all. Anything like even integrating a second library with it. So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely gives you respect for like these people who work in these other programming languages, or even like with hardware. Like, there's all these rabbit holes that I don't know anything about, and I'm not sure I want to know anything about. Like, I'm happy in our little web playground.
Yeah, I'm definitely 4GL and above. Like, keep me up there. I'm not getting too low level. It's just my dad writes assembly code. My dad writes literally assembly code, and I'm like, he's like, I can't understand your language because it's all words. Why would you want that? And I'm like, what on earth is mob? Push. Like,
yeah. Both my parents are programmers of like the, like old days programmers, and like, they're just different kinds of people. Like, my dad said recently he taught himself Fortran from a book. He didn't have a computer.
Wow.
I'm like, what?
Is that possible?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We've de-skilled a bit, haven't we? We've de-skilled a bit. And we have all the stuff given
for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Comes with productivity, though, right? The higher level programming languages.
Yeah, right. It's very true.
So Svelte recipes, what's that?
Oh yeah. So at the pudding, I found myself repeating code. Like, especially, hey, I want to make a new chart. And then there's all this like boilerplate, like binding the width to a container div, and maybe having a spring or a tweened array that kind of interpolates the values for you so you can animate it. And so I think so Svelte Recipes is just a site of recipes that I use a lot. And it's really important for me at work because I'm often starting new projects. This is something that definitely wasn't a thing at my old job, but like every week or so I'll start a new project, and then I'll be starting from scratch. So it's really nice to have things like there's like an icon component in there where, it has some directionality, like you can north, south, east, west, rotate the icons, which is really handy for things like arrows. And then I want to add a lot of things like toggles, like, I don't want to build a new toggle every time I start a website.
Yeah.
So that means you're going to add more stuff to it?
I'm planning on it.
That's great.
I'm definitely not a disciplined side project creator.
Who is though?
I guess that's true. Yeah. So whenever the inspiration strikes me, I want it to be like pretty fully built out, and I'm happy for other people to help out as well.
Do you have a like a GitHub repo or?
Yeah. There's a GitHub repo that it's I'm pretty bad at documentation, so there's definitely no process for contributing, or I probably have like just the basic Svelte README.
Well, there isn't really much. There's not much for contributing process on Svelte, to be honest. You know, we're working on it.
Yeah.
So one observation and then one question. So like one observation is, I think actually the kind of jobs that we have really determine the output that we have. Like you don't. It's not until you work on, like if you work on a single product, then you don't really care about extracting for reusability because it's already in your code. But then if you like start a lot of new small things, like at a news site, for example, like what you're doing. For me, you know, I do a lot of demos, so I have to start from scratch every time, and then hopefully speed up. So, you know, different kinds of jobs like lead you towards different kinds of inspirations, and I feel like, you know, Rich's job led him to create Svelte, and it's very much like I need these things right now, and like I'll take the hit of, you know, setting up this infrastructure so that I'll be more productive in the future. I feel like that's what you're doing here with this. With this thing, I don't know. It's cool. Open source utils.js. Everyone should do that. I kind of feel like a lot of these are actually hidden in the Svelte REPL. like, you know, when we save, it's just in there, and we just need like a way to give permission to share it. You know.
Yeah. Have you used the REPL?
I did once. I had trouble making a JavaScript file, and then that wasn't a Svelte file, and then I gave up.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that should.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of people that stumble on that. I think.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I mean, I don't know if it's a problem at some point. I don't know. Like,
we should have the default template. Just have a .js file and then import it just to show how it works.
Yeah, people have suggested this, but the problem is that the more you have, the more there is to delete, and it's like people go in there, they just want a fresh blank template and then create. You know, I think it's just like a UI thing. Maybe people find out in JS files hard. So
if there was like a README that just tells you how, that'd be great.
That is a good point. There isn't a README for the REPL.
Well, yeah, that was the PR that we got, was like a huge README with some example components and all sorts of stuff. But it's like you got to delete that when you start, and I just go in there and start typing straight away. It's fine for the first ever visit. Maybe it should be like a browser local storage thing or something. I don't know. Just
like a page that's linked to would be great.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know if you've seen the TypeScript Playground, which is also a REPL. And the TypeScript Playground, they just offer like a drop down of a bunch of examples that you can check out, right?
That's a good idea, yeah.
Load some pre-made stuff with some comments that explain what's going on. That's probably
a good idea.
Yeah, it'd be great. Other than that, it's like it's a great playground, and I like to see like what it compiles to.
And then I guess you know, for me playing around with this, I'm just like, I'm having so much fun with the scatter plot stuff. Basically, like it's so performant.
It is.
I guess that's D3 doing it.
Let's see.
So
what does it look like?
Yeah, well, you click on it and then it just like moves circles around.
So like, that's only using the built-in Spring, like the physics engine. So you can see it's getting imported at the top, and then you have this dots variable, which it uses Spring, which has like stiffness and damping, which I love it because a lot of like animation systems, you have some kind of duration and like the easing curve, but with Spring, it's a little bit more lifelike.
Is that your go-to then? You prefer that over easing curves?
You know, I never use it, but just because it's like not built into D3, and I guess I never think to, but I want it to be. I should be using it more. I think it feels a little bit better. And then so it's only using D3 to make these scales, the X scale, Y scale, R scale, and color scale. And
I also noticed you use the reactive labels to do the scales.
yeah.
I guess that's like when you add any pieces of information, it just automatically recalculates.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So the scales are using the data, I think it's a prop. Yeah, so when you use a scatter plot component, you just throw like an array of data in here. And then whenever data is updated, this, the X scale, which is just mapping, like, here's a value, where does that sit horizontally in the chart?
yeah,
So it switches like a data value to an X position. It'll just update that whenever data is updated or the width is updated. So easy to do. Like if you're doing this in React, you'll probably like, I don't know, use memo and then have that dependency, and then like, I don't know, it's like definitely a few more steps in React. So it's really nice to just say like, oh, $, update this whenever these things are changed.
I feel like so I've I've seen a bunch of like how to use React with D3 talks, and yeah, there's generally like a few different levels and approaches. It's kind of like, where do you want the framework to take over, and where do you want D3 to take over?
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like Svelte is fighting D3 a lot less. I don't know if you, like that's like yeah, I mean basically like sometimes you want you know, sometimes you want React to be responsible for more stuff within the rendered output, and then sometimes you want Svelte, sometimes you want D3 to be more responsible because D3 can do the drawing as well. But I guess here what you're doing is, and I see this a lot, especially with how Rich uses D3 as well. Like you're using the D3 utilities, but you're not actually using D3 for rendering.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah, that's my big thing with using D3 with JavaScript frameworks. So D3, if you aren't familiar, is like kind of the de facto library for creating data visualization on the web. It's been around for, I don't know, since jQuery days. And it's basically just a collection of different repos, different modules, and I've kind of split them out functionally. Like some of them will help, like the scales will help map like data values onto physical values, like horizontal position or color. Some of them will help with like creating maps, so like geographic projections. And some of them are like, this is kind of more the jQuery side, like they're there to update the DOM and manipulate it and kind of like change the structure of the web page. And those parts make me a little bit uncomfortable to use them with a JavaScript framework, because the framework's there to like know the DOM structure, especially React, which, you know, has it's not a shadow DOM. I don't know. They have their virtual DOM, and like their diffing algorithm, like they want to know what's there, so they know when to update it. And like you kind of fight against each other if like D3 is changing that as well. And you're kind of just like removing any benefits you get from the framework. So I think I would stay away from using that with either React or Svelte, because it just like gets complicated. It gets a little bit hacky to like use these two frameworks that don't know anything about each other to also update the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Svelte suffers less from that because it doesn't use a virtual DOM, for example. Or I actually don't know either which one it is. But it doesn't use one of those. But obviously, it can cause issues because Svelte does keep a track of kind of what's there and stuff. So, but yeah, it's I didn't really consider that actually. I just noticed reading the code now that it's separate from.
Yeah. For those who might be interested, Amelia has this amazing blog post called "How to Learn D3.js."
Nice.
I don't know how long you spent on this, Amelia, but it's amazing, and I wish I had it when I learned D3.
It's completely ridiculous. The blog post I spend the most time on get the least attention, and then I like put together this one on like what is percent mean in CSS. I spent like 5 hours on it. Like it's gotten like way more attention than this other one that I spent on like what is D3, which I spent days on
We
that.
went through everything in D3. And then like you can hover over it and you can see, so like, D3 has so many modules that it's hard to hold in your head. And honestly, this should be in the docs. Like it makes it that much easier to dig in and see find what you want. But yeah, that's a little interesting. Like maybe also you're becoming more productive. So like
it's definitely not the case, but thank you.
But also, I mean, I think you probably also spent like a few days on the React hooks one, and that was a blockbuster, I think, at least in my world.
That was definitely less work. The blog posts that took the most work are the D3, what are the different modules, and then using React and D3, which like I'm still working on it, but like not actively. Like there's just
it's still
so
a work in
much
progress. Oh yes, under construction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
not disciplined.
all right. So now that you've used Svelte for a bit, what do you think are the downsides, or where do you think Svelte could improve?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. Whenever I use it, I'm like, where are the gotchas? One thing I'm super curious about, and it's going to be hard for me to articulate this. So when we talk about Svelte versus React, we often talk about each component gets turned into, this bundle of JavaScript that doesn't then need a library, right? If you bind something to the client to the element width, then that'll kind of be thrown into the compiled code of the component itself, so you don't need to rely on a main library. In my head, my first reaction is there's got to be a downside to that. Like if an application gets large enough, are you repeating that code over and over? Like if you have a bunch of components that bind to the element width, are you just repeating that? And then like at some point, maybe a Svelte application is larger compiled than a React application. And I haven't tested this out yet, but.
There is actually like a really small runtime that comes with Svelte, actually. I'm not sure, and I'm not entirely sure exactly what's in it. Maybe Anthony knows more there.
There's some bits of it, yeah. So yes, originally Svelte did repeat itself a lot, right? So the bigger the app got, the more repeated code you'd have. The little mini runtime, it's basically a set of utility functions that ends up part of your bundle. It's not exactly a runtime, it's just more to reduce the repetition of code. But that's been done because of those, the complaints people saying that, you building a non-trivial app ends up with a bigger bundle. I still don't, from what I remember and understand and what I've read, I don't think you'd end up with a bigger application in Svelte than another framework. And I think that's due to the fact that Svelte's quite terse. But yes, there's definitely like that kind of little mini runtime, which does deduplicate some repetition, but it does exist.
Yeah, of course, it's already been thought of.
Well,
like,
ongoing improvement.
I think it matters if the crossover, like there's a crossover point. Like I think what you're saying is right, and it's an intuition that a lot of people have. I think Rich actually addressed it in the Svelte Society Day, like the conference that we had. He gave the closing keynote, and he talked about that a little bit. I think the difference matters if like there is a crossover point. Is it 100 components or is it 100,000 components? Because if it's 100,000, I don't care. And if it's 100, then that's something that we need to start thinking about trade-offs. But I think his point is that because we have a template language that we compile from, we always we could Svelte can upgrade behind the scenes to deduplicate or do whatever, while whatever we write still stays the same. So if we ever get there, if it starts being seen as a community problem, we can take care of it behind the scenes while nothing that we write changes. So I'm a little bit comforted by that. And then the other thing I also wanted to point you to is if you do investigate this on your own, there's a Svelte compiler handbook that kind of shows you a little bit of the internals. And for me in particular, when I went through and looked at the compiler output, so it's under Svelte.js/Svelte on like the GitHub repo. It's source/compiler, and there's like a utils folder that is basically the runtime, which is
Nice.
which is everything that's being used, and it's really small. Like they're not kidding when they say, like I think it's actually probably almost it's just like the way that they do these things is like they basically have an alias for every single DOM API, and then we just use the alias. I think that makes it easier to minify, but like it's not like a runtime like some of the other frameworks. So
Right.
Yeah.
those are the two thoughts that I have, but I'm interested to see if you ever dig into it.
Yeah, that's great to hear that it's already been handled mostly.
Hopefully, right? So,
Yeah.
so do you still use Svelte day to day? Like,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And
so are you working on anything fun?
I am. I have to ask, because this is a new job, I have to ask about like what we can say about client projects.
Makes sense.
It's definitely, client work is definitely new to me, so I don't know. I'm used to just like blabbing about everything. Let's see. Yes, it's definitely fun.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, like just in your line of like, do they have to sign off on what framework you use, or do they not care?
They do not care for the most part. Sometimes we'll have to, some of the contract projects that I've been doing on this side, they'll want to integrate with their app. And then like if it's a React app, I'll build it in React. But if they don't care, I'll typically do it in Svelte. It just seems easier at this point.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. Obviously, React and Vue and whatnot are our runtime languages, and Svelte is compiled. Do you think, based on what you've seen and what you know about React, do you think there's a movement or a consideration maybe that people start moving towards compiled frameworks, compiled languages?
It definitely feels that way. Like we had all those blog posts about the downsides of the modern web and like how websites are getting a little bit heavy.
Sure.
Like my website, I use React. It's like this massive React app, which is like completely ridiculous, but it's kind of my playground. So for the most part, it doesn't bug me. But I think there is definitely a movement of like moving, like cutting away some cruft and like making things a little bit lighter, especially with like, there was that article about like the carbon impact from like React apps, which makes me definitely a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, it's
carbon impact.
Well, it's like I don't know if I read it, but I assume the gist is, this is like a great way to explain something. I assume the gist is like the amount of JavaScript that computers are executing, that takes energy. Like this is like, as much as we love the web to be like in its own world, like it does interface with the real world and hardware. And, if so many people are running your massive JavaScript application, then, that's real energy that has to be created. So.
And I agree with the concept. I agree with that in theory. That's great. But I read a stat the other day, something like if all the Americans who have flatter tires than they should be, if they all put them to regulation, they'd save 3% of the US's energy, right? So it feels like it's a great thing to aim for, but it's just very contrived almost.
For what it's worth, Rich has made that argument before.
Right.
Yeah, he did it in one of his talks, right?
Yeah, JS Camp Barcelona, if anyone wants to look it up. He had like this image of the world on fire, and he was like, use Svelte and the world will not be on fire. So that's
it'll be a little bit less.
The fire will be cooler.
If only it was that easy to save the world, right?
Switch to Svelte.
Right.
Done.
Yeah.
I'm a hero. So.
I was just going to say, maybe we can relate Svelte to tires pumping up somehow. I don't know. Let's think of some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have this book on D3, right? Full stack D3.
I do.
And I can see there are chapters on React and Angular in there, but certain framework is missing there.
I was
Are there
thinking
any?
about adding a chapter on Svelte.
You
The
were?
hard thing is, yeah, so the hard thing is, like, originally we scoped it that way, React and Angular, because Vue is so similar to React, right? Like the same rules kind of apply, right? It's use D3 as a utility framework, a utility library, instead of, you know, modifying the DOM with it. So it's hard to justify writing another chapter that kind of says the same thing, but with different syntax. But maybe it's worth at least a blog post.
Yeah. All right. That's
Yeah,
good enough for me.
Done.
I guess before we kind of go to picks, one of the things I was hoping to learn from you, it was also kind of your creative process, because I feel like you use technology as like a creative tool a little bit, and that obviously permeates a lot of your work. Just do you have one, or does it just spring out of your head and it just flows into your keyboard? Yeah, how maybe one of the ways is kind of take us through one of the the projects or the blog posts that you've done, and like how does that start off in your mind before you even get to code?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been trying to formalize it for a while, but I don't know, it's hard. So I guess the most recent project I worked on was a few days ago. I made a blog post about like what is a percent unit mean in CSS, and it gets a little bit weird. Like, and the way I come up with blog post ideas is when I'm working, I just look for things that are a little bit confusing and I want to investigate, or something that comes up really often, like this Svelte recipes thing. So for percents, it's something you'll use a lot, especially with data visualization, is like positioning elements. Sometimes you want to kind of negate its height and width. So you want the middle centered on a certain point, or like a tooltip, you want it to be positioned above something, but like halfway, like centered horizontally, but above it vertically. And this is something that has been bugging me for years, is like, it's really unintuitive what like 100% even means in CSS. So
I read your article, and one thing that really stuck out to me was the thing that I don't remember which one it was, but it was
margins.
something like depending on the parent's width instead of the height.
Yeah.
It's like
so
really weird.
So margin top and margin bottom, as well as padding top and padding bottom, are a percent of the parent's width, which I don't know why.
Yeah, that is.
And I have, super weird and like not what you would expect if you were just like, oh, I want this to be like 20% moved down in this container. You wouldn't get what you would expect. And I think it's been used for like an aspect ratio hack. Like if you want to have a video element, you want it to be, like 9:5, then you can use margins or padding. Sorry, what are you gonna say, Sean?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, it's probably like a recursiveness thing. Like, the browser has to figure out what we want, and then I think it usually goes, tries to go horizontally, and then we add, if the margin top is modifying the height, that might be like an infinite loop of just like, okay, the percentage is modified, and then the height is modified, and then the percentage modified again, and the height is modified again. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah, you heard it here first. That definitely could be it.
I'm always very I feel like an imposter when I talk about browser internals, because like there are algorithms that go behind these things. It's just that we don't know them, and people who work on browsers know them.
Maybe we should have someone working on browsers on here. That could be fun.
Definitely should.
I want to just blow my own trumpet here for a second and say that when I was 20 one or something like that. I worked in a web agency, and this was before responsive design existed, right? That's how old I am. And I won an award because I made what I would say is a responsive website with basically no experience. And it's because I specified every single dimension on every single element in percentages. So it was responsive in that if you're on a phone, it's like
Oh my goodness.
site like this. It was just ridiculous. I mean, people didn't really use phones in those days, but it was like small screens and big screens and stuff. So I just want to say percentages are awesome. I totally agree with the use of them.
I love the like old timer attitude too. It's like you kids, you have Flexbox. You don't know the pain we went through.
Right? I was building sites for IE5 on Mac, and
Oh my goodness.
who knows? It's terrible.
That was a thing?
It was a thing, and it was awful. It was the worst browser ever. It was worse than IE. At the time, IE was like golden,
Yeah.
style browser. Yeah.
All right. So, any more questions?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like sometimes you also try to tell a story with the percent stuff. You make it interactive so people can actually mentally learn what the relationship is. But I think sometimes you also tell a story, like something that I only got by reading your post was the SVG elements thing, and you could have just done well, the scaling, the one with scaling. I don't know if that's
the one with the telescope.
With the telescope, exactly. So you could have just done some toggles with a number range, right? And then you could have just scaled a generic SVG. But instead, you like made it into a thing with a star and then a telescope looking at the star, and that really gives a mental model that like I still have from now on. You know what I mean? Like, and that really is makes you kind of inhabit that character in a way, which I thought was pretty cool.
I appreciate your confidence in me. I have to tell you that the secret is not enjoying writing words. So if I sit down to write a blog post, I'll like get a sentence in and I'll say, what else can I do here? So I can write fewer words.
If that's the net effect, then brilliant. Like, I mean, this is great. I mean, I think that kind of tutorial as well is just super valuable. I mean, having a realistic scenario for all the things you're trying to teach someone is just way better than. I know that your dad, right, learned Fortran from a book, but the point is, we now can make telescopes, stars.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You don't like function foo bar? That's no fun.
Not as much.
It's definitely the lorem ipsum of the development world.
Yeah.
And there's loads of them. There's 9 different words or something. There's quirks and quirks with 2 U's and.
I've not seen this.
Never heard of that.
You have to look them up. There's just so many weird ones.
There's like an appropriate way to fake variable names.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do picks.
I can get it started. I
Go for it.
have been feeling a bit of RSI in my hands. And also just like working from home, I don't have like a proper table. I have this like weird home table. So like, we have to really start taking care of our bodies, especially if we want to do this for a long while. So one app that I was recommended and I've been enjoying is this app called Stretchly. I think it's you can install it via Brew. So you like Brew install Stretchly and it just works. And what it does is it gives you micro breaks and breaks. So micro breaks that happen like every 5 minutes, and then breaks happen every like 25 to 30 minutes. And micro breaks is like 10 seconds, like just like stretch your fingers, stretch your arm, do a lunge, like, just like improve your mobility a little bit. And then breaks are where you just get off the computer and just go for a short walk. And I think that's a much better way to like, I don't know, force me to take breaks on the computer. So Stretchly.
Yeah. And it gives you like a Pomodoro as well, right? Because the time in between those breaks is when you're focusing.
Right. Yeah. I don't necessarily believe in Pomodoros as much because like I tend to take a while to wrap up. But, 25 minutes is a good block of time.
Cool.
Yeah. So I have a pick that it's also an app that I rediscovered recently called Focus, which is something I really need to do sometimes, but I always procrastinate instead. So this app, it pretty much lets you whitelist and block and blacklist like apps and websites that you're allowed to go to when it's active. So works well for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amelia, do you want to go next, or?
I did not prepare, but off the top of my head, looking at my screen right now, I've been trying out this new browser called Stack, which I've been really liking. It basically, it's not what you would use for your main browser, but I have like Twitter in there. I have like email, like anything I would visit throughout the day or want to keep an eye on. Like I have an RSS reader in there. It kind of just lays these windows side by side, and it took me a little bit of time to warm up to it, but I've been really enjoying just having, like, you can have different stacks for like personal and for work. And I always have this issue where like I have two Notion accounts, right? Like one's personal, one's for work, and like they really don't have a good like account switcher. So even just like having both of those up at the same time has been really nice. So I definitely recommend it.
And they have a Linux version coming in a few days, so I'm happy.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Good.
So this is getstack.app.
That's right.
I like it. It looks like TweetDeck for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It does, yeah.
For everything.
I need to try this.
So
No, I mean, I quite agree because, like, I run multiple Twitter accounts, and the switching gets a little gnarly. So, and some apps don't even have a switcher, so it's important.
That's cool.
It's really nice.
So my pick at the moment should be, because it's 100 million degrees, it's probably this fan. I really want to bring it closer. I'm not going to have a pick as a fan because fans are fans, right? What
That
I will
looks like
say,
a fancy fan. That's not like any fan. I know.
no, it's a Dyson. It's a Dyson one. It's pretty cool. They're quite good. I've got the filtering one as well. Nice. It works well, but it's a fan. So what I will say is my pick is going to be the Chris Hemsworth, i.e., Hulk, Thor, is called, where he acts in Avengers. His workout app called Center, which is like the word center in English, but without the E on the end. Really confusing. We'll just write it down, I guess. But basically, it's a workout app that gives you, it's all his trainers who do the videos. And it's all high intensity stuff, really. So it's like, you'll do half an hour exercise per day, and it'll be like super intense, and it'll absolutely drain you of any energy at all. And I've been doing it since like May or something. And I'm not really big on exercising, but I realized I was sitting at my desk all day long, not really getting any exercise at all, an occasional walk. And I really enjoyed the fact that, I'm actually losing weight. I'm getting loads of muscles I didn't even know I had. I've got almost a six-pack showing. I mean, it's really actually effective.
Oh.
For half an hour a day, right? It's just really super effective. And they have like courses you can go on to do specific things, target specific areas, that kind of thing. It's quite fun. It's quite educational because you're doing like different exercises. They've got like MMA training on there. They've got boxing. They've got functional training, which is just amazingly hard. The guy is a beast. I don't know how he does it. But they've got yoga and they've got Pilates and stuff on there as well. And I just think that like, it's almost something I look forward to now every day, which is really saying something for me in exercise. I really enjoy that half hour. And it's just, I just feel great. I walk around and I'm more upright. I go to clothes shop and try clothes on. I don't feel like, oh no, dread it kind of thing. It's really amazing for just half an hour. So I'm going to say that's definitely my pick of the last few months. In fact, I think.
I like how the three of us, four of us were like apps. And then you're like, yeah, I'm getting a six-pack and working on it.
But
It is an app,
also
though.
an app, right? It's a website. It's a PWA, right? So
It is an app. Yes, it is an app.
It's a web app, yeah.
Yeah. You do the recipes as well?
Sorry?
You do the recipes as well, like the cooking?
I do some of them, and actually the food's really, really good as well. That's worth mentioning. The food is actually fantastic too. It's quite hard to cook something healthy and make it taste really good, but these recipes are really fantastic. But yeah, I think the thing that's amazed me is getting me to do exercise regularly is I've tried it before a lot, and this is the first time I've ever stuck with it for any period of time. So
That's
cool.
a good review.
Oh, that's a great pick.
All right, I think
health related, you notice.
Yeah,
It's pretty
sort
cool.
of.
Well,
All right.
apart from me.
Yeah. All right. So that's it. I don't think we have anything else to talk about right now. But
Yeah.
thank you for coming on, Amelia. You're welcome back anytime. And yeah, take care, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.